The next subject I'd like to talk about pertaining to the Lubavitcher Rebbe is the Rebbe's great emphasis on Chabad Hasidus, Lubavitch Hasidus, the Hasidic dimension of the Torah. This is very obvious that the Rebbe would put such a great emphasis on Hasidus because the Rebbe was the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe from the first. His grandfather preceding him by many generations, the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson of the Adi. Actually, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov founded the Hasidic movement, and after Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov was the Magi from Mizrich, and the successor of the Magi from Mizrich was the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. And the Hasidic dimension of the Torah was greatly taught and propounded by all of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, and this was in addition to the revealed part of Torah, such as the 5 books of Moses and the rest of the Tanakh, the prophets and the writings, and the part of the oral Torah known as the Talmud, and the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and all of the other vast Torah commentaries by the Torah sages throughout all the generations. So the Rebbe, throughout his entire life, greatly emphasized the importance of studying the Hasidic dimension of the Torah together with the rest of the Torah. Because the Rebbe always said the Torah is really one Torah. It just has different parts, which really, in its essence, is all one indivisible whole, because it all comes from God. And the reason for the great emphasis of the Rebbe on Hasidus is that Hasidus openly talks about God himself and how God relates to the world. In the revealed part of Torah, such as the 5 books of Moses and the Talmud, there is more of an emphasis, not a total emphasis, but much more of an emphasis on the fulfillment of the commandments of the Torah in actual practice, and how we derive the laws concerning the fulfillment of the commandments from the Torah. Hasidus also talks about that too, but Hasidus also much more so emphasizes the godliness of the Torah, how God relates to the world, what happens in all the higher spiritual worlds above this world when we do the Torah and commandments in this world, how God relates to the world, how God creates the world on an ongoing basis, and how God is revealed in the world throughout studying Torah and doing commandments. And this much more greatly sensitizes a Jew to God himself, and therefore he gets a lot more joy and enthusiasm and liveliness in fulfilling the Torah. So the Rebbe what I'd really like to do is describe the personality of the Rebbe in a very specific fashion, but it's a little bit difficult to do in a limited space of time because there's just so much to the Rebbe. So I suggest that the viewer delve into the study of Chabad Hasidism to learn much more about the Lubavitcher Rebbe and to become much more familiar with who the Rebbe was and is. There are many things I could say about the Rebbe to describe his accomplishments and his personality. One of the biggest aspects that I can say about the Rebbe that openly demonstrates the great stature of the Rebbe was that Lubavitcher Hasidim, everything was centered around the Rebbe in Lubavitch. That Lubavitcher Hasidim, we were all and still are, even after the Rebbe's passing, greatly devoted to the Rebbe and totally united with the Rebbe. And in the first paragraph of the Shema, the prayer in the prayer book called the Shema, it says that you should teach the words of the Torah to your students, not to your students, to your children. It says you'll teach the words of the Torah to your children. And one of the most major commentators on the Torah was Rashi, and Rashi says on that sentence in the Shema that these are the Talmidim, the students of Torah. That the Rebbe, one of the things that really singles out the Rebbe to make him really unique and different than every other Jewish leader, and this goes also the same thing for all other Lubavitcher Rebbes, going back to Baal Shem Tov, and actually all the Jewish leaders, one top leader of every generation, is that they look at Jews and teaching Torah to Jews in a way that Jews are like their children, that it's a family type of a thing, that you don't feel like you're talking to some professional rabbi who's lecturing to a crowd. The Rebbe had a very powerful, very personable personality where he made you feel so connected to him and to Torah and mitzvahs, the Torah and his commandments, that you immediately find yourself at home in this Hasidic Lubavitch setting. One second, I want to take a look at my notes. Another thing that can describe the Rebbe pretty accurately is the notion and the concept in Torah of a tzaddik. A tzaddik is translated as a very holy, righteous person. But however, the term holy and righteous person is too general and is too vague to accurately impart what the definition of a tzaddik is according to Hasidus and according to the rest of Torah. A tzaddik, he has a very powerful and high level of of godliness in his soul, and he is very close to God himself, and therefore he, throughout all the generations of history, big tzaddikim. One second, I want to check the time. Throughout all of history, big tzaddikim, the very holy and righteous Jews were absolutely just gigantic Torah scholars. They transmitted the wisdom and will of God as it's expressed in the Torah. And the word transmitted here is a key word, because they didn't just cook up all these ideas on their own. The key word in Chassidus is bittul, self-nullification. Not to really nullify yourself, but to rectify and take away personal selfishness and egotism, so that these tzaddikim were so close to God that they literally transmitted, the will of God as is found in the Torah, because they were such big Torah scholars. And the Rebbe exemplified this to the utmost, and that's reflected in the great love and devotion and closeness and excitement that the Lubavitcher Chassidim had and have for the Rebbe. There's obviously a lot more that I could say about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a lot more. Actually, what I'm really hoping for is that the Lubavitcher publisher will soon come out with a volume, or maybe multi-volume work of the biography of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And I would even venture to guess that maybe they're working on it, that they have been working on it all these years. But I highly encourage, I just want to say in conclusion, that I want to highly encourage the viewers to study more of the many scholarly Torah books about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, about Chabad, Lubavitch Hasidism. So that concludes this two-part Torah lesson about the Lubavitcher Rebbe.